5:30 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd please all join me, we'll stand for a moment of silence and we'll follow that with a pledge. Thank you. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please do roll call?
Counselor Bryan.
Here.
Counselor McNutt.
Here.
Counselor Tappan.
Here.
Counselor Cormier.
Here.
Counselor Warner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kojin.
Here.
Mayor Bill Zayat.
Here. The special meeting this evening, we have basically one item of business under three different categories this evening. Under new business, presentation, information regarding zoning code. This time we're going to have an update and a presentation on our code, and I'll turn this time over to Jerry.
Mayor, members of the council, it's a pleasure to be before you today. This is the culmination of a 3-year process we've had to update the page zoning code. And I am going to start off by asking Matt Kleisico to come up and give you a quick background. I know you spent a lot of time talking about and thinking about the zoning ordinance, so he's really going to refresh your memory on how we got to where we are today.
All right, well, thank you, Jerry. Mayor, council, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am also very excited to kick off this kind of final component of updating the page zoning code. I think, whoops, I apologize. Forgot the clicker. I think we all are certainly very familiar, as Jerry mentioned, that this has been a extensive process. When we came on board, it was back in 2016, and we've had a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings and dialogue over that period of time. And as I went through our files, I actually pulled out our comment matrix form, and we've actually had over 358 unique discussion topics and a total of over 35 hours of actually public participation time. So whether that's in a task force meeting or some of our joint council and commission meetings or retreat, there's been a lot of dialogue and discussion. And so based on that framework, I didn't want to go into a long, detailed discussion this evening that I've provided in the past. I want to give a broad overview to give some context, as Jerry mentioned, to where we've been and how we got there. And then I think I'll turn it back over to Jerry to make some additional comments, and then obviously certainly available to address any questions or issues that come up. Before I jump into it, though, I thought it might be worthwhile just to put up on the screen the goals that were placed upon us at the initiation of this effort. So sometimes when we get so far removed from the initial effort, the goals get kind of lost. And I wanted to put those up there where we kicked off this project with this notion of making the code compatible with the general plan, making the code more user-friendly, promoting new development, business, and tourism, but also ensuring that the code protects existing desired development and especially existing residential neighborhoods, and develop a code that preserves the aesthetic and natural environment of the city. So while it has been a long time, I think those goals certainly still hold true today, and those were the foundational pieces that drove us as we went through this process with the community, and certainly guided us along the way. To jump into it, though, I think the first thing to recognize is that a majority of the code is not going away. A lot of it has just been either reorganized or revised in order to make the code more user-friendly, more intuitive, more consistent with modern codes. So you can see this, I know this slide has been shown before, but on the left we have the table of contents that outlines the format of the existing code, and then on the right we have the table of contents of the proposed code, and it's kind of color-coded to show how the code was reorganized. It's organized based on a more, it's placed more in line with the development process, so those sections of the code that are more frequented are placed to the front of the code, with those that are less common or needed towards the back of the code. But I will acknowledge that we hear a lot of feedback of, well, if the code is more user-friendly, why does it include so many more pages? So I did want to make an observation or a point that the existing code is 160 pages. The proposed code is 231 pages. But I would encourage you, don't get the notion that just because we have more pages means that the code is more regulatory. In fact, a lot of the information we've put in the code is dealing with just best practices or even some state mandated elements. So as an example, the administration section in the existing code is 18 pages, but it lacks a lot of the state required statutes in terms of addressing the administration boards that should be included in the code, as well as the specific processes that need to be put in the code, like a formal citizen review process that is not outlined in the existing code. So we went from 18 pages to over 40 pages just to address those state mandated elements. Another example, the definitions. Currently, the code has 15 pages of definitions, but it actually has some definitions in the code that aren't actually used in the code itself. So we have extra definitions, and then we have some terms in the code that don't have definitions at all. So we went through and scrubbed the document very extensively to provide that additional clarification, and it ended up being 51 pages of definitions alone, just to make the code more user-friendly in the sense of being able to remove ambiguity and allow someone to say, well, what is your interpretation of that word compared to my interpretation? And so right there alone, there's 60 pages that really are predicated on no specific policies or issues, just trying to reach a good quality code for you to utilize as well as meet state minimum requirements. Now, again, we certainly did look at permitted uses. And one of the issues that we talked about is that notion of can we make the city more business friendly? Can we look at trying to reduce the number of conditional use permits that the code currently requires? And as we had those discussions, we realized that a lot of the existing uses that may require a conditional use permit in a certain zoning district could be made a permitted use by right if we simply just added some additional policy language to mitigate some of their impacts on adjacent development. So that's really, when we look at the supplemental use standards, that section is pretty lengthy. You can see from the slide, it has a lot of guidelines for different uses. But those came out of the process of trying to identify some policies that could help remove the need for a conditional use permit for those and allow those to be by right in specific zoning districts. So again, it wasn't a matter of going in and saying, you know what, we think we need some more policies on these specific uses. There was a train of thought, a process involved in terms of defining what supplemental uses should have more policy associated with them. Also, accessory uses. You know, it's interesting, the current code lacks a lot of guidance on those accessory uses, or those uses that are associated with a permitted use. And the odd part is that accessory uses are often the things that generate the most complaints from the public. My neighbor is parking too many cars in their front yard. Someone's living in an RV in their backyard. Or someone's running a business out of their home that's making a lot of noise. All of those complaints that you often hear, the code lacked a lot of clarity on that. So again, some of those highlighted areas are areas where we added some additional policy relative to those traditional accessory uses. And one example that I just wanted to touch on is that recreational vehicle parking. Within the code, we have two sections that deal with parking of recreational vehicles. And actually, the code somewhat contradicts itself. In section 7.2.11, it states the storage of a boat with a trailer and not more than one uninhabited camper or recreational vehicle for each residential unit may be stored in the front yard of a residence if it is surfaced according to section 7.2.12e, which actually states that it must be paved with asphalt or concrete. Now, if we go to section 7.4.1, it actually talks about the same requirement that boat, trailer, personal watercraft, not more than one uninhabited recreational vehicle, but then it goes on to say such vehicles shall not be stored in the front yard. So there's some ambiguity there, but we also see that it's pretty restrictive in the sense that if you have a camper and a boat right now parked in your front yard, that's good, but if it's not on concrete or asphalt, you're not meeting the code. If you actually have a boat and a side-by-side, you're not meeting the code because it does state that it's only one or the other. So we looked at great detail at those nuances that seem like such a simple idea and tried to really look at all the variables of it to define something that will work for the greatest amount of people in Page. So again, as a paraphrase from the code, we then developed the policy of the parking and storage of recreational vehicles, campers, travel trailers, motorhomes, boats, and personal recreational vehicles is permitted on any residential lot subject to the following. The vehicle does not exceed 14,000 pounds of gross vehicle weight. The vehicle is parked on a paved surface, but we clarify that that could be asphalt, concrete, rock, or gravel. It doesn't have to be asphalt or concrete. Doesn't extend into the sidewalk or street, and is still limited to two such vehicles in the combined front and street side setbacks. So we don't make a new distinction between what combination of vehicles, we just say two. And then we have a graphic that kind of displays what's allowed and what would not be allowed per that policy. So again, it's these types of situations that have a lot of different factors to it that require some thorough attention and sometimes more lengthy policy than one might initially think. Now, we also certainly addressed many other topics, and we're happy to dive into those in greater detail as needed through tonight's conversation. But just as a reminder, we also looked at the development standards, or the term used in the existing code is bulk standards. We certainly scrubbed those to identify any greater flexibility we could provide, or to make sure that they're consistent to the uses that they're trying to control. We also looked at the general development standards. So parking, we modernized parking standards. We gave a lot more flexibility to parking. We also looked at landscaping. So we introduced, the code touches on landscaping. It refers to landscaping, but it doesn't give any guidance on what landscaping means or should consist of. So we provided some additional clarity on that about site landscaping as well as streetscape landscaping. And then also signage, READ compliant. There was a Supreme Court ruling about signage. And so we needed to bring the code up to be consistent with that new regulation or determination. So now the code is READ compliant. And then obviously we also digitized the zoning map. So we did not change any zoning of property, but we took a zoning map that was not in any computer digitized way, and we combine that into GIS so that we now are able to update that as cases are processed through the town or through the city. We can update that GIS files and have a more current zoning map, more so than what we have today. So that, again, high level, wanted to take you through some of those topics, and then I'll turn it over to Jerry to give further input.
Well, we have a beautiful view of the dam here, so we can look at that for a while. But, I'm sure Kane's pulling up my presentation. There it is. I'm going to be talking about the draft now that the Planning and Zoning Commission has recommended to the City Council. And get the clicker out here. Yep, there we go. So, a lot of the information that I'm going to talk to you about now, I presented to you in a work session about 6 weeks ago or so. So I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but just to say that one of the things that staff wanted to do was to take a look at things that we felt were unnecessary roadblocks to approvals. And that's one of the things that Mike asked me to do when I arrived, take a look at the zoning ordinance and based on my 30 years of experience to see if there's anything that I thought that we could do to further streamline the process. Overall, in the zoning ordinance, I want to mention that I believe what we received from the consultant is good quality work. Our current zoning ordinance is one of the most difficult ordinances that I've ever seen in my experience to use. It's very, very difficult to use, and that in and of itself can dissuade people from coming to a community and developing in a community if they look at the ordinance and can't figure it out. The new zoning ordinance that the consultant has drafted for us brings it up to modern standards. So one of the things that we looked at was allowing for more permitted uses, and Matt talked about that, and that's one of the things they focused on. I focused on that as well, and added a couple things that I thought could be added in as permitted uses and didn't necessarily need a conditional use permit. If you make somebody go through a conditional use permit process, you're adding anywhere between 3 to 4 months to the process. If it's an allowed use and has standards built into the ordinance that provide protection to the city, then you save that 3 months in the process. So I won't go over all these. We've talked about these before, but these are things that I felt could go from not permitted sometimes or a conditional use permit to a permitted use based on the relatively low impacts that these land uses would have. So when you see the strikeout, that's what was proposed by the consultant. You see the light blue, that's what staff proposed. So you can see the things that staff proposed to change. Stop me at any time if you want to spend some more time on stuff. This one shows animal kennels and shelters. C3 is one of our more intense commercial land uses, and I felt that could be a permitted use there and not have any impact on anybody. Commercial use categories, religious assemblies in industrial park. Sometimes religious assemblies can work very well in industrial parks. They have very different parking needs, and so can often share their parking between the two types of uses. Adult entertainment business, that's one that caused a little bit of concern to people when we talked about it. The reason I'm showing that as a permitted use is because adult uses hire only the best attorneys. And they look very carefully at zoning ordinances. And if they come in and see that an adult use is not allowed anywhere, that gives them very strong fodder to come and to challenge a zoning ordinance. And I've seen this happen before. And so that's why I felt that we could take our most intense land use category, industrial park, and go ahead and show that as an allowed use, so not make somebody go through a conditional use permit. So that's why that's shown there. Other commercial uses, in general, there are allowed uses in the industrial park, such as restaurants, and restaurants with drive-throughs, convenience stores, that I felt would not impact the industrial park, and would allow people to be able, who are working in the industrial park, to not have to drive too far to be able to get to those services. If they want to get a lunch, if they want to get a candy bar, a Coke or something like that, they won't have just outdoors. And I felt that that could work very well in some of our heavier commercial and industrial districts, that somebody could come in and do those kind of uses in the SC or the industrial park districts. Also wanted to remove the automatic reversions of conditional use permits. Conditional use permits, and this is something that was a carryover from our wireless code. The consultant was asked not to do anything previously. He was asked not to do anything to the wireless code, but I felt that we should go in there and make it very clear that when the city wants to revoke a conditional use permit for our wireless facilities, we need to go through the same process that we went through to approve it. So it has to go back through the approval process in order to revoke a conditional use permit. So I wanted to change that as far as the ordinance was concerned. We got feedback from one of our citizens who was very concerned. She had read articles about people who were keeping chickens, and the fact that chickens can carry salmonella. And this is a relatively new discovery that was made, and I checked up on it, and truly that's something that scientists are finding as well. And so what she suggested is that we put some language in the ordinance to make sure that when people are cleaning out their salmonella, she didn't want that to occur, and that sure made sense to me. So we had a place in the ordinance that it fit well, and I thought we could add that into it. We also looked at normalizing parking standards for restaurants in particular. We did a small analysis on a 2,000 square foot restaurant, not one that exists, but just kind of drew one out. And for the city of Scottsdale, they would have required 17 spaces. I went to Scottsdale because I did work for the city of Scottsdale. I'm not trying to compare us to Scottsdale. I'm not trying to make us into a Scottsdale, but only because I know the work that went into their zoning ordinance and the attention that they paid to restaurant parking over the years to make sure there was enough parking, but not too much parking to dissuade people from building restaurants. So what I found is that for Scottsdale standards, with a 2,000 square foot, typical 2,000 square foot restaurant, they would require 17 spaces. We would require 24. And that's why I suggest that we use Scottsdale standard, which is one space for 120 gross square feet. And when and as opposed to knowing the way our ordinance is currently set up, you have to know how much space you're going to have for kitchen, how much space you're going to have for storage, and how much space you're going to have for the public. This gets rid of all this. This allows people who are coming in, don't really know how they want to lay out their restaurant. And we see it often, that people come in, have an idea, don't know how they want to lay it out, they have a building they want to use. Now we can say to them, okay, your building is this size, here's how many parking spaces you'll need to provide. It simplifies the process. So the next slide shows then if the council approves it, this is how it would appear then in our ordinance. Again, one parking space for every 120 square feet gross. We want to be able to have the Planning Commission to allow them to continue to approve our conditional use permits. One of the things that was in the ordinance, and this is not unusual to have the conditional use permit go to a Planning Commission, then to the City Council. But we felt that in the past, the Planning Commission has been able to approve conditional use permits. Why not stay with that policy, especially if we can save anywhere between a month to 2 weeks to a month in the process. Why not save that time if we possibly can? We also want to have the ability to process minor amendments to our general plan concurrently with the zoning case. And that's one thing that the way the ordinance was drafted didn't allow that to occur. And in my opinion, seeing them both at the same time is really a better way to approach it anyway, because looking at a general plan amendment by itself doesn't give you very much information, going from one category to another, and usually no graphics, et cetera, et cetera. This way you're looking at the general plan change at the same time you're looking at zoning, so you have much better information to understand what's going on and to be able to render a decision. Now, we had a hearing on October 2nd, and there were a number of issues that came out of that hearing, and One of them was, and this came from the Planning Commission, one of them was about the age of manufactured homes. The draft ordinance said that nobody could bring in a mobile home that was older than 10 years old. They felt that that was a little too restrictive, and felt that should be changed to 20 years. And so that's what's reflected in this slide and in your draft ordinance. They are also very interested in allowing people that the required area for parking will be allowed to be covered if it's open on 3 sides, is architecturally compatible with the dwelling unit, so it can't be somebody coming in and just building a metal shed over top of their parking. It would have to be compatible with the existing home. And it certainly doesn't extend into any rights-of-way or into any easements. It can't be a situation where if we need to dig up their sewer for some reason, need to bring in a backhoe, we're not tearing up their carport in order to get to our sewer line. So that's why that language was added. Citizen concerns were raised on the second, and I'd like to cover those and talk about our recommendations based on that. You can see there's a number. There's probably about a dozen of them, and I will talk about them each in detail. Number one, there was concern that people were not allowed to use cargo containers for construction, and we actually using cargo containers for construction is actually a function of the building code. And the building code does allow for cargo containers to be used for construction. So that's one of the things we wanted to put in there, so anybody reading this portion of the zoning ordinance wouldn't assume that they couldn't use it for construction. And that was the concern, is that it looked, based on the language, it looked like you couldn't do that. So that's why we added this language, to make sure that people understood that that was, if it met the building code, that it was allowable. There was a couple of questions about residential site and architectural guidelines, and some of the questions that they raised is, will these apply to single-family residents? Why do we need guidelines? Aren't those more for master plan communities? And lastly, why prohibit different building types and materials? So we'll talk about each one of those. The guidelines that are in your new draft zoning ordinance are designed to replace the guidelines that we have in the Gateway Area Specific Development Plan, which applies to certain areas of the city, typically on the western side of the city, close to the highway. We have heard a number of times that those guidelines are too specific and there's not enough flexibility. An example is a hotelier wanted to come in and use a certain kind of rock on the side of his hotel. And we said, staff said at that time, well, no, you can't do that because here's the Gateway guidelines. And they said, well, we don't want to follow those guidelines. We don't use your kind of rock, and so we'll just go with stucco instead. And so that's an example, I think, of guidelines that are way too specific, that don't allow enough flexibility. The first citizen question is, will these guidelines apply to single-family homes? And the language that you see in orange there is actually language that is already in your draft zone code. So that has not been added to it. That was in there. That was in there the whole time. But I put it in orange to be able to emphasize the fact that the requirements shown in this section of the zoning ordinance apply to new multifamily dwellings, new and renovations of existing multifamily dwellings. So it does not apply to single-family dwellings. And the point at the bottom there is that if we wanted this to apply to single-family homes, we would have to amend the zoning ordinance in order to do that, because it's not in there today. So one of the questions that was raised, why do we need these guidelines? And what I found when we looked at it more thoroughly is that there were words like shall and required and things of that nature. And guidelines really should be more of a language of should and not recommended. Because if you get away from those kind of words, if you get into shall, then that becomes ordinance. Then that's a directive to somebody. And if it's guidelines, it should be a little more flexible, so they and we have the ability to adjust a little bit and get the kind of product they're looking for and get the kind of look that we're looking for. So staff is recommending then that we change that language both in this section and in the commercial and mixed use and business and industrial sections. So there's very similar language in all three of those sections, and we recommend then that we change it to have this more guideline-like language put in those sections. Architectural site, residential site and architectural guidelines. The question was, the third citizen question, why prohibit building time-sensitive materials? The more staff looked at that, the more we agreed with that. And so we recommend striking all those requirements that were in there. One of the requirements was exposed, untextured, uncolored, and unaugmented concrete. And when we look at pictures of Baum and Geary, we can see that the use of unaugmented concrete can actually be very striking and can be something that people pay $10,000 a night to be able to enjoy. So, so we thought that that was probably worthwhile. Odors and air pollution, there was concern that, and this came mostly from cases in Florida and California, that zoning ordinances were being overused perhaps by municipalities to prevent people from even barbecuing in their backyard. And so one of the things we added in there is that the use of a home barbecue shall not be considered an unreasonable use. And the unreasonable, you can see it talks about the unreasonable quantities of smoke, noxious fumes, gas, etc. And so we want to make sure that everybody understood that the use of your backyard barbecue does not fall under this part of the zoning code. Exempt temporary uses, one of the concerns was about yard sales, that we were regulating yard sales. And if people just did yard sales every couple months or so, that would not be a problem. But we do have a concern at a couple of locations, I understand, in the city where people are holding almost continuous yard sales. And so that's why this is in here. That's why I recommend that it remain in here. We did change it from three days every quarter, and every quarter would be 12 weekends, to 3 weekends per quarter. So that would allow you to have yard sales 3 weekends out of every 12. So that's 3 weekends per quarter. Destruction and replacement. There was concern about when a structure has been damaged by something called force majeure, and I wanted to pull the definition out. Force majeure means that it's an element. It's caused by elements of nature, not by man. So it's basically what we used to call an act of God, basically. And so the concern was about the 50% of the current assessed value, and the mutually agreed upon appraiser. So we'll talk about each one of those topics. The current zoning ordinance has that 50% marker, and most zoning ordinances that I've seen carry that 50%, saying that if over 50% is destroyed, then you need to basically bring your structure, when it's rebuilt, up to the existing zoning code. So we're not recommending that change necessarily. But the appraisal, we did change the language on the appraisal because we felt that we didn't necessarily need to agree to an appraiser, that if they hire an appraiser who is licensed or certified by the state, that would satisfy our needs, that we didn't need to approve them if they met that criterion. Landscaping. One of the concerns was that these requirements would apply to people to single-family homes, and it says there these requirements apply to residential and non-residential uses except those located in the IP district. So, yes, a reading of that would say that it would apply to all residential uses. Their concern was that they would be required to hire a landscape architect if they wanted to change their landscaping, or that if they had a dead plant, they would have to replace it within a certain time frame. So we took a look at that, and our recommendation is to change the language to say that the requirements do not apply to single-family home lots. So it would apply to overall subdivisions. People who are developing subdivisions would have to come in and meet the standards, but not people who have individual home lots, that they would not have to meet these standards. So would not have to hire a landscape architect. They can still go to Home Depot, pick out a tree, plant it in their front yard, and not have to have a landscape architect review that. Outdoor vending. One of the concerns was that, could outdoor vending be used in a way to prevent people from selling Girl Scout cookies? And so we wanted to try to find a way to make sure that no future heavy-handed community development director would try to block people from selling Girl Scout cookies. And so what we did is we added prevent people from doing those two activities. Compact parking spaces. We heard from a number of people that they felt that compact parking spaces probably aren't a good fit no pun intended, in Page. And so we looked at that, and we agreed that considering the size of the vehicles that many citizens drive in town here, many people have boats, many people need large trucks in order to tow those boats. And so we recommended going back to the, and one other issue that was raised on the 2nd of October was about motorcycle parking. And the concern was that, gee, what if somebody a business wants to cater to motorcyclists? How does that work? And so staff's recommendation based on that was that all developments shall be allowed to designate a portion of their required 10 by 20 spaces. So they will have to come in and say they need to provide 20 spaces. They're going to have 20 spaces worth of parking. Now, they can take some of those spaces and designate them for motorcycles. And they can put them close to the front door. If they cater to motorcyclists, they can come in, they can park by the front door. And you can get a lot more motorcycles in a parking space than you can cars. So that was our thoughts on that. So we had a second meeting of the Planning Commission. They had continued it to further consider issues. And so there were some issues that came up on the 30th, not as many as on the 2nd. One of the things that came up was about accessory buildings. The concern was that accessory buildings, we were saying that and the draft zoning ordinance said that they needed to be designed as an integral part of the principal structure and should be similar to architectural style, materials, colors, and similar features. The Planning Commission wanted to simplify that. So you see that in green. That's one of the things that the Commission wanted to simplify and just get back to saying that architectural structures and uses should be similar in color to the principal structure. They really wanted to simplify that. Another thing that they looked at was, and this is a little more complicated, in the RE1A and RE2A. RE1A is acre lot, RE2A is 2 acre lots. And a lot of those lots in 1 and 2 acre size are kind of ranchette styles. And in the ranchette styles, often people will pull their home back from the curb. They won't have it close to the front curb, and often will have another use in between. Maybe they keep horses, and maybe it's easier for them to load and unload their horses if the mare barn is closer to the street than it is putting it behind the road. And so they wanted to open flexibility in those categories to allow those kind of accessory uses to occur in the front setback. And that's what that language is all about, allowing it to occur in what would be considered the front yard of those ranchettes. Landscape maintenance, that's another thing the Planning Commission, and actually a citizen raised this concern during the Planning Commission meeting on the 30th, that she felt that landscape areas, there should be a permanent fixed irrigation system, but it doesn't need to necessarily be installed by a licensed contractor. She asked that be struck, and the Planning Commission agreed that they would like to strike that. Also, determination of nonconforming status. The Planning Commission was looking to have the burden of proof on the city versus on the property owner. So the draft zoning ordinance said that the owner, occupant, or user should have the burden to show that the nonconforming use was established prior to the effective date of the ordinance. The Planning Commission felt that it should be the city that has that burden of proof and not the property owner or their tenant. Lastly, our Planning Commission identified an area that they felt that we should add a definition, and so they came up with this definition and wanted to add it into the zone code, and so there you have it. So the last thing that we're going to ask you to do here today is to approve the new zoning map. Matt talked about the importance of the zoning map. The one we have now is very, very outdated, and it's very important that we have this new zoning map to be able to work from. Mr. Mayor, that is staff's presentation.
Thank you. Does council have any questions at this time? Appreciate the work that you've done on the feedback that you got from your meetings. We can see that there has been some work done in those areas. And we do understand that this is a living document, so there's going to be changes as things occur. So we appreciate that hard work.
Thank you, sir.
If there's no questions from council, then what I'd like to do is we'd move on to the public hearing portion of the meeting. And we'll go ahead and do that. We've gotten 4 requests to speak. What I would like to do is I would like to limit the talks to about 5 minutes apiece. And what we will do is at 6:30, we will close that meeting, and then we will start our regular meeting. But the first item of business after the minutes and such will be back on this topic if we still have things to do, i.e. public hearing or conversation. So at that time, what I'll do is I'm going to, by the order that you filled out a sheet, I'm going to call you to the podium, and if you would state your name for the record at that time, we would appreciate that. And the first speaker for the public hearing will...
Mr. Mayor, I move to open the public hearing.
Oh, excuse me.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to open the public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. It is about 6:15 by that clock because it is running a little slow. Mr. Doyle, please. Can you just state your name for the record as you start your conversation? Thank you, sir.
Dave Doyle. I'm a little concerned with the 5-minute time limit, considering we just sat through the 30-minute presentation on this, but the first thing I'd like to address is the user-friendly code. It is a bit long, which does, and with all those definitions and the wording that's in there, does not look as simple as some of the things that were presented a little later. I know that there are a lot of people who have a lot of problems reading through this. I consider myself a fairly learned man, and I have had to sit for hours upon hours and take breaks to read through this thing. It's not as user-friendly as it has been presented so far. Let's see here. Okay, so all right, guidelines verbiage that that were brought up, they're not meant to be as restrictive. We changed to shall, from shall to recommended, things like that. If we're not actually setting a guideline, why do we have it in there? An ordinance is your guideline, period. So if we don't need it, let's get rid of it. I will say that the new zoning map, very interesting. Though I'd love to see if we had a city planner, which I know we're looking for, that could take a look and give their input before we start designing our city. They should work hand in hand with the layout of how the city should grow over the next 30, 50, 60 years. Let's see here. I know I preached before. I know Mark's heard me a couple of times say this, that we should go with the broad strokes. This is a very restrictive document overall. We did have, our secondary structure wording was made simpler. Why don't we just make it simpler to begin with across the entire thing? You're looking at, there are colleges out there who, they built a college, but they didn't lay any sidewalks. They didn't do that because they wanted to know what fit the college best. You wait for the paths to be worn, and then you pave them. Same thing goes with these restrictions. Wait to find the problems before starting to restrict it. You can build a house with as many walls as you can, but if the rooms don't fit, it's harder to tear down those walls when you have load-bearing walls, you have things set up like that. Instead, start basic and then add to it. Just get the foundation and that's it. We're trying to anticipate every possible thing that we can anticipate. One of the other concerns, I know it still hasn't been addressed, is how the interpretation of this goes. There's a lot of ambiguity that has been brought up. Some's been addressed. I know a lot of people have tried to address them. If we wanted to go over the code, I'd need probably another 3 to 4 hours to go through each individual thing that I've found. And I'd need more time just to go through the newest writing of it. Right now, we're still limited to the interpretation of one person, and it's not even an elected official. You're taking the zoning administrator and putting him in complete control of interpretation of this document. I know that we did address some things like the individual wording of the Girl Scout cookies, the lemonade stands, the barbecue for smell, but again, that then comes down to the interpretation by limiting to just those things. You're saying that, you know, the barbecue is fine, but if something's going on in my house, if I'm doing any kind of upkeep in my house, if I'm building something and I happen to, you know, be sawing wood and that wood comes to a burning smell, that's not listed, could be interpreted that I'm in violation of that. And I do a lot of handicrafted things myself. One thing I noticed that we didn't do, and we require this for a lot of projects and things that go on, where's the cost analysis? Where's the impact study? There's nothing listed that if you did bring somebody, had to come up to code, how are some of our elderly or living on a fixed income, or even, you know, the teachers who we're already in a housing crisis and they can't afford to live and work here, they're suddenly able to scrape by building a house or buying a house. Now you're going to make them bring it all up to code, and they don't have the money for this. Have we done a cost analysis? Have we done an impact to see what's happening? You know, the concept of the carports, which I understand is, you know, trying to make them look like the house or be part of the house is one thing, but, you know, some people just want to have a place to put their boat or their recreational vehicle, or, you know, my motorcycle, I want to keep it under a carport. But I might not need an entire carport for that. Some of those movable structures that are, which you mentioned, just a tin roof over a framing, are perfectly acceptable. They're not an eyesore, and they're well taken care of. Why are we, again, still limiting what we can do for our own property on our own property?
We wrap it, so.
All right, well, then if we're time limited, then we'll wrap it right there. But there are many, many more things I could bring up here, and I'd love to bring up if we do it. I would like to suggest that you guys not pass it. If nothing else, I'm hoping that this goes to the new council. There are some, you know, passing something along to the new council that they didn't have the opportunity to do themselves would be an injustice to them, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colby.
My name's Ron Colby. Some of you know me, some of you don't, some probably wish you don't, so whatever. I'm here to ask the city council to move on this planning and zoning and vote for it tonight and approve it. Over the past several years, as I've tried to expand our existing businesses, I'm the operations officer for Gary Yamamoto Custom Baits, the Powell Campground, and several other little smaller businesses we run inside of that. Over the past 3 to 4 years, we've experienced many difficulties with the zoning and planning. I see with the stuff that's been presented and the changes that have been made in this new proposal have addressed a lot of those concerns. One of them, the city had no planning for a campground, which last year we bought a lot of property intending to expand that campground. And we ran into a lot of obstacles. Anywhere from, there was no interpretation for a campground, and it was trying to be made into a mobile home park. 8-foot privacy walls, extreme amounts of parking, asphalt paving for every single place, and then requiring us to capture the city's water and runoff and from their own property. The new ordinances, which specifically address our campground, not that I'm 100% in agreement with it, but it is a major effort, and for me to continue on with our project, which we've spent several $1,000s into expand this campground, is being delayed by our zoning and planning and the passage of this new ordinance. So without the passage of this ordinance, I'm going to pull the plug on this because it's in no way revenue-wise or anything else to do it. And as I've presented with the mayor and past city managers and our current city manager, which I want to commend the council for our new city manager. He's been very proactive in helping with these issues. Lost my train of thought there for a little bit. But with our proposal and the study we did, we were turning away an average of 94 units, campers a day out of our campground. So we needed to expand. And that was a way for doing it. And then our current zoning in that was not allowing it to be adequately address those issues. And even with the expansion of our bake company, which we've spent several $1 million in buildings and equipment to keep this company in this town, 160 employees. And the zoning and that has run very large brick walls against us. So I encourage the city right now to pass this ordinance tonight and get it moving, because any further delay is, one, the revenue that the city's going to lose on our camp spots, because Walmart is not generating any tax base for you guys, and as our previous zoning planning person told me, you know, that doesn't matter. But this does matter, and we're generating revenue for the city, and we'd love to expand it and continue on. So, again, I encourage the city to pass this ordinance tonight.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Carey. And we will wrap it up at 5:30, and then we will...
Cut me off when you need to.
Okay, and then Arlene will be the first speaker when we restart at the regular meeting.
Brian Carey, 1500 Westview Drive. I just wanted to thank the council and the Planning and Zoning Commission, the citizens that have been involved, LPNN, for the time spent in looking at this. When the council took it on as a strategic goal, it was the equivalent of pasting a kick me sign on the back of your backs, because it's not an easy process. But if the city's going to grow, if it's going to continue to remain attractive or improve, if we're going to tackle affordable housing issues, we've got to have a good foundation with a modern zoning ordinance. I haven't attended all the public workshops. The one I have, there have been good comments made, and the city staff has been very responsive, and it seems that it will be a vast improvement, a vast foundation. I just urge the council and the city manager that the next step is going to be the crucial one, which is going to be the implementation. There's been some scare tactics used in terms of even some misinformation that still remains in comments made tonight about senior citizens being priced out of their house because they have to come up to standards or other types of things. It's not true. So the key thing will be public education and a statement of policy from the council as to how you want to implement this. I don't think anyone envisions some Nazi zoning enforcement staff out pounding on doors the day after the ordinance is passed, but that is a fear. And so I urge the city through its website, its newsletter, its commissions and other outreach to let the citizens know exactly what this might mean to them. It's not going to change their lives overnight. And if they are currently out of compliance with the existing code, they've had 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of a free ride. And so they need to be aware of that and to say that you weren't in compliance before, you're still not in compliance. How can we get there? The mayors for our city may be a way also to tackle some of the bringing up to standards of already non-compliant areas, and perhaps simple trash pickups or some kind of volunteer efforts for throwing gravel in a driveway or anything like that might be another way to encourage citizen buy-in into this. But I do urge that we get it passed, get it under us, and move on to make a beautiful city. Thanks.
Thank you. We are going to go ahead and shut down this meeting, and we will reopen the regular council meeting, and this item is agendized for that under the first item under old business. And Arlene, you will be the first speaker at that time. We will go through our regular format of minutes and stuff like that, and then we'll do that. I appreciate all of you for showing up on this very important topic. That being said, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Probably ought to recess the public hearing and then reopen
Okay,
it.
all right. I'll ask for a recess to public hearing.
Would recess public hearing.
We have a motion and a second to recess the public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We will recess the public hearing. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Adjourn work session of this meeting.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We will start our regular council meeting in approximately 2 minutes, and then we will go through our regular format of introductions and minutes and stuff, and we will be right back on this topic. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Gentlemen, welcome to Page City Council's regular meeting. It's November 14th, 2018. It is 6:35 p.m., and I'd like to call this meeting in order. If you'd all please stand with me again, we'll have a moment of silence, and we will follow that with a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Madam Clerk, could you please do roll call?
Councillor Bryan.
Here.
Councillor McNutt.
Here.
Councillor Tappan.
Here.
Councillor Cormier.
Here.
Councillor Warner.
Here.
Vice Mayor Cogen.
Here.
And Mayor Diak.
Here. Priorities list, discussion.
It's come to my attention that this may perhaps be your last formal meeting in front of this.
It will be.
So with that, it leaves, I believe, us a little unprepared. So I'm going to ask for a little impromptu. Bill, you've served 9 years, 3 terms mayor and 1 term city council. You served on numerous statewide and regional boards as an advocate for the city, and have always worked countless hours behind the scenes on our behalf. You helped us navigate through a financial crisis. You put us on a platform of unity and a clear direction of improved path. You've championed a lot of causes, and you've had a lot of successes. But I think I can say, to behalf of the citizens of council, especially at least for me, the Page is a better place for the Chinese movement. And what I'd like to do is ask the council and staff perhaps to at least get together. The staff has prepared a certificate in lieu of a formal plaque that is forthcoming. So if we could all perhaps present you with the certificate here before we start the meeting.
You're going to make the rest of this meeting hard for me to do.
Yeah, right.
Never prepare for a day like this. For me, it has been a journey that I have honored and appreciated, representing my city to the best of my ability. I hope that you that have been around a while, and you were maybe just here the last year or even the last day or two, can find in your hearts the love that I have for this community, and that you will continue to try to make it the best you possibly can. My nearly 38, well over 38 years, nearly 40 years of being in this community, I think that it was a real love for me even before I came here. And I spent 38 years being a part of this community and trying to make it a better place. The last 10 of that have been here in this building, and it has been the best part of my whole life. It's with that. And I've got many, many years. I thank you all out there, and I certainly thank this council for helping me make Page a better place. And staff, without staff, we couldn't have done it at all. We're the visionaries standing here. The work is done by the real people behind the scenes, and they're all our employees. With that, I'd like to give a round of applause for our employees. Get through the rest of this meeting. Does anyone else have anything to say on their strategic priorities? None. Discussion, possible action by city council pertaining to city councilors' individual priorities. Anyone? Minutes, I'd entertain.
Move to approve the minutes.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously of all members. Consent agenda. The consent portion of the agenda is a means of expediting routine matters that must be acted upon by council. All items approved will be done by one undebatable motion passed unanimously. Any item may be removed for debate on request of any member of council. Items removed from the consent portion become the first item of business under the regular agenda. I'd entertain.
Move to approve the consent portion of the agenda.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next item of business is public hearing. At this time, we have a possible continuation of the public hearing for a zoning ordinance update. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Mayor, I move to reopen the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I think that was unanimous. At this time, the public hearing is opened again. We have one other person that had made a request to speak earlier this evening at the public hearing portion, and that was Ms. Miller. Arlene, if you'd please come to the podium, and that time will be yours. At the last time around, we were giving approximately 5 minutes for that. Please feel free to tell us what's on your mind, ma'am.
Arlene Miller, I'm here in my flesh and blood capacity. And again, I would remind you that each of you have sworn a sacred oath of office to protect the people's God-given, unalienable rights to their private property. And I often wonder, how often do you consider the cost impact on the people that live here? What right gives you to dictate what people can afford to do and what their financial status might be by these regulations? And with the mobile homes, what if that's the only thing they've got? And then all of a sudden you're going to say, oh no, you can't put that on your lot. How un-American is that? And then I also have a problem with the zoning administrator up here occupying a seat in the room at City Hall and telling you how to pass this new zoning code. And especially, he doesn't have to have an oath of office. I can't accept that statement. And I beg of you, please postpone this to the new council. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other? There being no other requests to speak this evening, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously of those members present. I thank all of those that have participated in the public hearing and for your words, and we will definitely take in those under advisement as we move forward in this evening. The next item of business is hear from the citizens. Hear from the citizens, a time is reserved for citizens to comment on non-agendized items that are within the council's jurisdiction. Personal attacks on council members or staff or members of the public are not allowed. It is inappropriate to utilize this time for purposes of making political speeches, including threats of political action. A person speaking shall observe the rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct, and refrain from impertinent topics, repetitive comments, slanderous remarks, or personal attacks. Engaging in such conduct will be grounds to end the speaker's time at the podium or for removal of any disruptive person from the meeting. The City Council cannot discuss or take legal action on any matters during this hearing of the citizens. However, at the conclusion of the hearings from the citizens, individual members of council may respond to the criticism made by others, or may ask council or staff to review a matter or ask this matter be put on a future agenda. This time, if there's anyone that wishes to address the council, if you please raise your hand, I'll recognize you, and if you'd step to the podium and give us your name and address, that time would be yours. Anyone who wishes to address the council this evening? Seeing none, moving along to our regular agenda. Unfinished business, discussion, possible action by City Council to repeal the existing Page City Ordinance 152 and the existing zoning district map and adopt a new ordinance and a new City of Page zoning map, Ordinance 648-18. I'd entertain a motion to introduce.
Mayor, I motion to introduce ordinance number 648-18 by title only.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce 648-18?
An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, repealing the existing City of Page Code of Ordinances, Chapter 152, also known as the Page Zoning Ordinance, and repealing the existing zoning district map, adopting a new zoning ordinance for the city of Page, comprised of sections 1 through 9, and adopting a new City of Page zoning map.
Thank you. At this time, open the floor to council for further discussion and comment on the zoning ordinance. Comments?
Mayor, I'll start, if you don't mind. As a liaison to the Planning and Zoning Board, I've spent a lot of time on this topic and listened to concerned citizens for a very long time, since I've been on council, basically. And I think, those individual topics of concern have been mostly recognized by the consultant's efforts as he went through tonight and outlined. I think as a big picture, what I was pleased to see as a big picture is we're streamlining the process for developers. We're simplifying the code for developers. We're reducing uncertainty of investment for developers. That's been our nemesis for a long time. People came wanting to build a business here and they turned away from Page because of the uncertainty of their investment. Time is money to a business. Weeks matter, months matter, especially on a seasonal business. When they're trying to get something open for a season, if they miss half the season because of the permitting process, they basically missed the whole year. So and that's what we've missed in the past, I think, and I think that's what this helps address. Mr. Colby did a good job of outlining what it would do for his particular business, and I appreciate hearing that. We've heard that from numerous people in the past as well. So I'm very supportive on the commercial side, and I think some of the information that's came out on the residential side is just not accurate. And I think Mr. Carey outlined some of that as well, and I appreciate that, Brian, for doing that. You know, I actually see this code as less restrictive. I see it as a more clear document, less restrictive, and I think you know, the extra 60 pages or whatever it is mainly in definitions and state statute. That's where it is. So I'm excited to see it. I'm very supportive of it moving forward.
Anyone else?
Well, from my perspective, we started the process 3 years ago. There was a special task force assigned. They spent weeks on this, many hours. They passed it over to the P&Z. The P&Z spent many meetings. We had joint meetings with the P&Z. This council had numerous meetings where we'd gone through and dissected section after section with the consultant. It went back to the P&Z. The P&Z had hearings, listened to the public, made revisions. I think from what I hear from Jerry, every single concern was addressed. I do understand and appreciate we have some new individuals coming on board, but we can't stop the clock and go back 3 years and start over. We have not only new development on the heels to break ground waiting for this ordinance, but we have, more importantly, existing businesses that are stymied. And as Mr. Colby said, we can't have rules and regulations that hinder our largest employers and our largest business base in the community. We have to have a method to have a growing community that provides aesthetics and the values that people want to move here with. And that's what this does. And so I'm supportive, and I urge that we pass this tonight.
Anyone else?
Just one thing. So I've been very appreciative of this whole process and the task force and their views and everything that's gone into this ordinance. The draft that was recommended and is sitting before me today is much improved over what was initially presented and that we talked about almost a year ago. I just want to put out there that it would be unreasonable to expect that we're going to pass an 100% accurate and perfect ordinance or zoning code. Getting most of the way there and breaking down those barriers that are currently in place with the current code that stymie business, that prevent growth and prevent a lot of things that should be going on right now is a primary goal that we should be looking at doing. You know, our strategy is to help the city of Page grow and to foster business, and the current draft that I've looked at over the past couple of weeks here is it goes a long way to doing that. So keep in mind this is not written in stone. As we go through things and we look at, hey, this doesn't work, or maybe we need to add something, the next council can do that. Things can change. This is not something that's written in stone and permanent.
Mr. Mayor, that's one of the things I'm getting real tired of hearing. I've been here, most of my life. I've built commercial, I've built residential here and stuff. Everybody keeps saying this is a hindrance. This is a protection for the people that build and stuff. I've had people build crap next to me, and this is the kind of stuff that keeps that from happening and stuff. And if there's something that's not going to work, like he says, we'll change it like we have in the past. This is the best attempt to make things right and give us something to go by with that. When you walk in there and you talk to the building department, they can tell you this is what it says, and you know instead of what we've had before, when you walk out, you don't know what you're gonna do. So, this is the best thing we do, is pass this, move on. If there's something don't work, we'll change it like we have in the past.
Anyone else? Go ahead, no,
I'd just like to thank the citizens and the staff that have put in those hours and hours over the years working on this document. Like Darby said, it's not 100% perfect, but it brings us out of the 1900s and brings us into the 21st century and gives us a framework to work with.
Thank you.
Mayor, move to pass ordinance 648-18 to a second.
I wanted to say something.
Well, okay, I'm sorry, I won't make
For
that
that.
motion.
You still can for discussion after he makes his motion.
Okay, go ahead, make your motion, whatever.
All right, I move to pass ordinance 648-18 to a second reading.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion? You know, I agree with everything that was said here by those people that spoke at the podium in the public hearing. I listened to Mr. Colby and talk about the fact that it stymies commercial growth and those things. I have had people literally walk out of my office because of our code that we're bringing businesses here. That's disheartening. Some of them local people. So I applaud the fact that we've made inroads to help that part. I also heard two other individuals speak about concerns that they have about hampering the citizens' rights and residential people and stuff like that. This code does not harm that. If a person is got a home and it is a trailer and it's 25 years old and they're living in it, this code does not affect them. What it does do, when it says 20 years old, it means that a new person coming to town or another individual can't bring in an older trailer that old. Let's take a look at a 20-year-old trailer. You know, they are livable. We've got people living in 35-year-old, 40-year-old trailers out there. This does not hinder them. They are compliant and grandfathered because they're already in their unit. This does not hinder them. It hinders and puts restrictions on future new development or upgrades or things like that. If you want to paint your house, doesn't bother it. If you want to put new appliances in your kitchen, does not bother it. So those are things that are not real concerns. I can see that people may feel that way, but I believe that those things can be addressed. Are we going to put people out of their homes because the trailer's too old? No, we're not going to do that. That would be unconscionable, and it's just not heard of. So are there things in this document that we need to change? Absolutely. As we move forward, we're going to be looking at it, and we're going to have to fine tune it. But we don't have to necessarily totally reinvent it. This is a good product, and we just got to figure out where the rough spots are on it as we move forward for the next 20 years with it. And it is a living document. If we continue to keep working it, it will only get better. So, any other comments? We have a motion and a second on the floor. Being no further comments, I'll call for the question. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously of the council present. Thank you very much. New business, discussion, possible action by City Council pertaining to inter-fund transfers. Ms. Watson.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This item here is pertaining to Ordinance 632-17, and as a reminder, this is the ordinance that pertains to the final 1% of our privilege tax collected to be allocated between our bond debt reduction and our capital projects for the city of Page. City Council is the authority that we need to transfer funds, to transfer money between funds within the city's adopted budget. So what we're bringing before you now is the permission to transfer the 2.968 is a total from the general fund to the debt service fund to cover their debt service payments and a portion of our PSPRS unfunded liability amount. 1.5 million will be allocated toward our bond debt payment for the year, and 1.468 million will be allocated toward our PSPRS unfunded liability amount since we have reached that bond payoff balance in the reserve fund. In addition, I'm also requesting to transfer 1.5 from the general fund to the capital projects fund. This is the 15% of 1% privilege tax that is stated in the same ordinance. This amount is dedicated to serving future capital projects needed within the city of Page. And then the final request is to transfer 1.468 million from the debt service to the general fund so that I can make that payment of the PSPRS unfunded liability as a part of that debt reduction plan that the council wanted. I'd entertain any questions.
Questions?
All right, I move to authorize Finance Director to execute the interfund transfers as stated.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to execute the interfund transfers. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Linda. Next, discussion of possible action by City Council pertaining to the payment of Public Safety Personnel System PSPRS to be applied toward unfunded balance liability, City of Page. Linda.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is giving me the authorization, now that you've given me the authorization to move the funds from where they're budgeted to now actually execute this payment of $1.468 million to the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System and apply it toward the unfunded liability. This unfunded liability covers both our Page Police Department and our Page Fire Department. The Page Police Department is at a as of our last actuarial, the PD had a $3.4 million balance in their unfunded liability. Our Page Fire was just under $600,000. So we have made, in our budget this year, the council's authorized that payment, a $1 million payment to be made toward the debt balance. And I'm just asking permission to go ahead and make that 1.468 payment.
Okay. Question?
Point of clarity, Linda, the 1 million payment was for last fiscal year, the 1.4 is for this fiscal year.
That is correct, yes. So we'll have a total payment of 2.4. They're not reflective in those balances, so because the actuarials are behind.
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the Finance Director to execute payment of $1.468,000 to the Public Safety Personnel Retirement System to be applied toward the unfunded liability balance for the City of Page.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion or question? Seeing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, those members present. Thank you, Linda. It's your lucky night.
It is.
We like paying bills. Discussion of possible action by City Council pertaining to the creation of a separate fund to track the revenue and expenses for Horseshoe Bend. Linda.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What this is not actually paying a bill at this point. This is basically making a budget change. Currently, in our current fiscal year 19 budget, we had set aside $500,000 for expenses that pertain to Horseshoe Bend. It's been brought to our attention that we want to be able to track the revenue and the expense for this $500,000 and then going forward in our future years of all the revenue that we're going to be bringing in and the expenses that are going to pertain to this. So we think that the best way to do this is to create its own fund. So what this motion tonight is to actually request to move the $500,000 that's sitting in a line item within the general fund and allow us to create a separate fund, the Horseshoe Bend Fund. We're also, currently we're in the process of exploring benefits of setting up a Horseshoe Bend Fund as an enterprise fund. So once we learn about our options in that area, maybe we can make an educated decision on whether that's the decision. But right now we're just saying, asking for permission to move it out of the general fund and then set it up wherever council would prefer.
Mayor, I move to create a separate fund to track revenue and expenses for Horseshoe Bend.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further question or discussion?
Got a question, Linda. We have interdepartmental expenses associated with the operation of Horseshoe Bend now. How are we going to account for those interdepartmental expenses? Public Works has traffic control, they pay sanitation. Is it going to be an end of the year capture? How would you propose we do that?
Well, I think the best way to do that will be to go through like an activity coding. We have that ability in our finance software. If we have expenses and revenue coming in that we can associate to that, I would have to work with the Public Works Director so that they could disseminate on, say, a timesheet if we're talking labor, what pertained to Horseshoe Bend. We can always allocate that and then charge it to that fund appropriately, and expenses and revenues.
And so prior years, as we move forward with collecting fee use for Horseshoe Bend, the idea is we get paid back for the expenses we've used. So you have a way to track all the prior years that we've spent, paying the Park Service and those associated.
Do you have that documented? Yes. And a lot of the expenses are in capital projects fund and designated as Horseshoe Bend, so we could go back and do that as well.
Linda, can I ask, when throughout the last couple of years, when public safety gets involved in various work out at Horseshoe Bend during the peak season, have we reached out to see if they capture any hours for us that we can come back and capture? Or
I haven't at this point asked them. I would imagine that speaking with the police chief, we might be able to. I don't know what records they have kept on the timesheets that we've received, unless they've documented it on the timesheet in finance. We wouldn't know that, but their records, they may have more tracking, but I could certainly check with them.
I'd like to know if we can do that, because I know there's been significant effort spent out there, both police and fire, from time to time.
Be happy to do that.
That's important, that, what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got a good method to recapture to the general fund.
Agreed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes,
So
sir.
is this wholly and separate from the rest of the Horseshoe Bend project funds? This 500,000?
Yes.
This was just a placeholder that we had because we knew we were going to have upcoming expenses once we set up the fee booths, but we didn't know when all that was going to. We know now when it's going to take place, but it's not a part of the millions that you just approved a meeting or two ago on the construction.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing no other questions, I'll call the question. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Discussion, possible action by City Council pertaining to Native American power pooling and scheduling agreement between Page Utility Enterprises, the Pueblo of Ocama, and the Western Area Power Administration. Resolution 1219-18.
Yeah, I'm going to move to introduce the resolution 1219-18 before I bring Brian up.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to introduce 1219-18. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. All members present. Brian? Oh, yes, while you're coming up, she's going to introduce it. We're saving time.
A resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, authorizing and approving the Native American power pooling and scheduling agreement.
Now, Brian, can you tell us what that's all about?
So, when they developed the CRISP Act back in 1958, that entailed building approximately 6 or 7 dams in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Glen Canyon being the flagship of that project. They put all those dams together, and that's the CRISP pool. Everybody gets a little, for all the publics, let's say the municipalities, the co-ops, and public utilities got a piece of that federal hydropower pie. Back, and Page got a slice of that too, although it only takes care of about 25% of our needs today. In about 2000, the Department of Energy said, we're going to allocate 7% of this pie. We're going to take a little bit from everybody and give it to the Native American tribes as a resource. They should have a piece of this too. Several of those Native American tribes don't have utilities or didn't have a way to use that. When that took place, they developed what's called benefit credit contracts, meaning that we can go to one of those Native American tribes and say, hey, well, let us lease we'll take your energy, we'll pay Western, make them whole for that energy and capacity, and we'll give you the benefit of the difference. So it provides a little revenue stream for the tribe, and then the energy gets allocated. We have 2 of those now today. That's with the CRIT, Colorado River Indian Tribes down by Parker, and the Utah Utes. That gets pooled together with Page's allocation, and the balance, of course, we have a real tight relationship with Western, whereas they do a full electric service contract because we're hanging off the all-federal system. In this case, the Acoma was decided that they wanted to start their own utility. There's a lot of politics with that, but naturally they were part of a cooperative, and as part of the cooperative, they're part of a bigger GNT, and they said, we want, then here, take it, you're gone. Western contacted us and said, Paige, would you be interested in picking this allocation up for an indefinite period of time? So the period of this could be a year. It could go through 2024 to the end of the contract. It could go longer if we renew it. So we mentioned it to the board. This is a very good tool to keep our relationship going with Western. Staff recommended it to the board. The board reviewed it, looked at our situation, and recommends on the council to move forward with this benefit credit contract.
I move to adopt resolution 1219-18.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the question or discussion. Seeing none, we'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
Brian.
you. Appreciate
Any
it.
more, bring them to us.
Good guy deals.
Discussion, possible action by City Council pertaining to preliminary plat Canyon Country Subdivision, PN 800-12-026T, sub 19-02. I skipped number 5? Oh, I'm sorry. Discussion, possible action by City Council pertaining to exchange easements parcels 801-14-07A and 801-14-007B, Resolution 1218-18.
I move to introduce resolution number 1218-18 by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Madam Clerk, would you introduce Resolution 1218-18?
A resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, pertaining to the exchange of easements.
Brett? Just wanted to see if Jerry was on his toes.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're seeking approval to vacate a 30-foot wide public easement in exchange for an additional easement. The parcel that we're talking about is on the corner of Lake Powell Boulevard and Highway 89. The applicant wants to vacate the 30-foot wide easement along the existing property line in exchange for new easements in different locations. So right there is the easement they're looking to vacate. It is currently zoned PDC. And with the vacation of the easement here, they'll grant us an easement here to city property back here.
So there's currently nothing in that easement?
Currently, there's nothing in that easement.
Yes.
And that gives us easement to some landlocked property?
Yeah, on the golf course, towards the golf course.
Nice tie.
Thank you. Planning and zoning recommended to approve the vacation of the 30-foot easement at their October 30th meeting, subject to the following conditions. Additional easements shall be required as needed for future developments and will need to be recorded with any change to the existing plat and or future development. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And if those additional easements will be needed in the future,
For future.
okay, do we have a means that we will make sure that we're tracking these, so we don't lose track of any easement?
Correct. It will be on the plat.
Okay. But will be recorded upfront then?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt resolution number 1218-18.
Second? We have a motion and a second. Further question or discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Resolution 1218-18 passes unanimously.
Mayor and council, if I could, Jerry has done an incredible job with his staff, and what you're seeing there is the new Brett. You know, I'm sort of getting used to the look,
guy
you know, but he looks sharp, and you know, we're excited. Thank you.
Brad, how many years you been here? And this is your first presentation before council?
You did very well.
Thank you. And we like new faces. Okay. Discussion, possible action by city council to pertaining to a preliminary plat for Canyon Country subdivision, PN 800-12-026T, sub 19-02. Someone else new. Miriam.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Well, we are seeking approval of the preliminary plat for the Canyon Country subdivision. The property is located at the intersection of Forest Avenue and Gum Street right here. It's a vacant lot. And here are some photos of the property. As you see, it's adjacent to Canyon Lakes apartment. It's the photos from like the east side, the Forest Avenue. And here are more photos of the property. So the applicant is requesting to divide the parcel into 27 lots through the major subdivision with the intent of building townhomes. The property is currently zoned RM multifamily. and the townhomes are permitted uses in this district. The general plan designates this area as high-density residential, and the proposed development is consistent with the general plan. Here we have the preliminary plat. As you see, we have 12 lots in the north and 14 lots to the south, and the large lot in the center. So the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval of the preliminary plat in their last meeting, subject to the following conditions: that all the additional requirements of the zoning ordinance shall be met, and within 18 months after approval or conditional approval of the preliminary plat, the subdivider shall submit and get the approval of their final plat. And this is it. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Yeah, I've got a couple. These are individual townhomes for sale, correct?
Yes.
Is it under an HOA or not?
Well, I don't think so. Is it?
To maintain the common area, I think there would have to be an HOA. There's going to be a common area in the center of it.
So the HOA hasn't been written yet, I'm assuming?
Not to my knowledge.
And vacation rentals. Yeah, I'm just looking at parking and lack of, in this, for lack of a description, cul-de-sac. I'm not sure how you describe this thing. Looks like, is it one way in, one way out, or? Yeah, it's kind of a circle and you come out the same way, right?
Yes.
Where would you park 3 or 4 boats in here if you had them? Or could you?
Well, right now it's just the initial step that we are dividing the land, but I believe they have 2 spots like at the front. Yeah.
No, I think
I'm just thinking of the potential homeowners. I mean, this is great. These are like tiny homes, I assume, probably what, 1,000 to 1,500 square feet plus a parking spot. Would that be close, Jerry?
Yes, and I think you're looking at 2 spots.
Two spots.
Yeah, the big garage for 2 cars.
Question I would have, Miriam or Jerry, we just passed for first reading the revised zoning ordinance. And this project, if approved tonight, does it fall under the old zoning code or would it fall under the new zoning code?
For the site plan review, they have to meet the new code, the requirements in the new code.
Yeah, I mean, affordable housing is what we need in the community. And I guess this is how you get it. I'm just, if I own lot number 5, I'm just concerned about, the parking and if it's verboed, what could be brought on a daily basis with boats and campers and you name it. So that's my only concern is there enough space in here for neighbors to come and go and.
so. Maybe I can tag on to that and ask a question. With the access, the way it is designed, there would be no parking on street? Okay, that would eliminate the trailers and the boats. Because what I'm looking at, if I'm correct here, the lots have a 20, what's the frontage on the lots?
24.
24. Okay, so that would eliminate parking a boat or a trailer in the street.
If you're Airbnb in one of these,
Yeah, you don't care.
you don't care and you don't know what's in front of the house.
No.
You just show up and you got 24 feet in front of your house. You're going to park your 20-foot boat and your 20-foot truck and you have a 40-foot rig and you're parked in front of your neighbor's house.
Yeah.
That's my concern. So I don't know how to control that, but it's nice to have small homes, but I don't know how to how to control that.
So,
Yeah, and it's actually owned by the Navajo tribe, isn't it?
That's correct.
And
The width of the roadway, as it is 24 foot wide. They're going to have to sign both sides of the street, fire lane, no parking.
So that's actually kind of my next question that I would have had is, with as long of a cul-de-sac or whatever that is there a fire and safety concern if, say lot 1 catches on fire and you're over in lot 13 and that fire spreads, how do you get out?
Well, this plan went to all the departments, the community development, utility, public works, fire. They all reviewed it. They had no concern.
I think that's a legitimate question, is what Darby just brought in, is I'm sure you can get a fire truck in there, otherwise they wouldn't have approved it, but if you have, this is common walls, is it not? You have common walls, and I'm sure there has to be a fire barrier sprinkled between them, but I mean, I'm not an expert in fire, but that's a concern for me.
Each individual unit will have a fire sprinkler system in it.
This is like, it's not up to city council to regulate building code.
I was going to say, this is
This is done everywhere. These things are built everywhere.
This is
It's not our problem.
Yeah, this is what multi-family housing looks like, close together.
I think the only difference we have in Page, you're right, the only difference we have in Page is the vacation rental component comes with that, as far as the size of vehicles and boats. It can change what this neighborhood should look like. I don't know how you account for that.
I'd be more worried about protecting the R1 zone than I'd be worried about protecting those people. If they want to buy those and turn them into VRBOs, which is not very likely, that's their problem.
well,
It's not going to happen.
Brett, your comment was that because of the size of the street, that it requires all red curb?
Correct.
Okay.
Both sides.
So it is enforceable.
So Brett or Jerry, is a question, when the HOA is written, is that considered? Is that something that can be considered in this?
No.
I don't know the
Not
answer.
a city function.
I know it's not from a safety function.
Yes, that would not be the city function, but that is something that can be considered when they create their HOA. And any CCNRs that they have, they could create CCNRs that would prevent people from, I believe they could prevent people from doing short-term rentals.
Yeah, that's the one and only way that that you can
Unless the attorney.
disallow that.
Well, maybe I
The
misspoke.
homeowners association, the developer, the owners can get together and create their HOA that prohibits that, but the city can't dictate that to them.
Correct.
But they can do it if they want to.
Brad, move to approve the preliminary plat for Canyon Country Subdivision PN 812-026T sub 1902, subject to the conditions recommended by the Planning and Zoning Committee.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further question or discussion?
Last question, Marion, is since this plat is in compliance with the new zoning code and parking requirements, as far as everything is on lot parking, there's no provisions for visitor parking or any of that in our code, or
Well, they still have to go through the site plan review process. This
Okay.
is just for dividing the lot, that's it.
that's all this is for?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
And Darby?
Yeah, I would just, I would feel a lot better about this if there was a secondary ingress egress. I feel the single one is just risky, honestly.
Well, if you look at the picture here again, we have this townhomes to the south, and the back of the lot is like another vacant lot, and there is no other place they can add another access.
And I guess that's where my personal opinion, that spot where you've got adjacent parking right there could be,
Here?
they'd lose, no, south, right, to the right.
Right here?
Here?
Oh, that's other private property.
Yeah.
Private property.
Seems like that could be an additional, at least some sort of a emergency exit. They'd lose a lot, but honestly, I think that would.
You're talking about into the apartment complexes next door there and
Right.
egress. I don't know if we can direct one private owner onto another private owner's property, though. It's not city streets, but.
Yeah, I understand that. I just feel it's something that going forward they may want to consider talking to that adjacent property owner about that. I do.
Well, as you said, this is just basically to plat the land, and then the development is going to have to perform to our standards. So at that point, the commission can talk with the developer on how to rearrange perhaps additional parking or whatever need to be. I'm assuming.
And the other problem is like if they want to add another access, they have to remove some of the lots, and based on the general plan requirements in high density residential, for like each acre they have to have 12 units, and they must have like 26 units. So that's another issue we have there.
They've got 20, and they've got 26 units, is that correct?
Yes.
So what would be the minimum they could have? 22 or 20?
26.
26?
Yes.
All right. Any
We
further
got
questions?
we got the same situation in several places in town. We just passed a new zoning code. Well, right, first thing out that we're trying to tell a guy how to develop his property. Makes no sense.
All right, I think we've added our questions and our comments.
Call for the question.
Call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay. For the record, we are 6-1. Thank you, Marion. Discussion of possible action by City Council pertaining to the zoning change parcel 800-12-025 from RM multifamily residential to CBD Central Business District. Ordinance 652-18 for its first reading. I'd entertain a motion to
Introduce ordinance 652 by 18, -18 by title only.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce 652-18?
An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, amending the zoning classification of parcel number 800-12-025 from multifamily residential RM2 Central Business District CBD.
We have any? Brett?
Good evening, thank you, Mayor. So the property we're talking about is by Lake Powell Furniture. He owns that property that is currently RM zone. And he's looking to rezone it to CBD so he can extend his business. The general plan allows it as a downtown business area. site plan here showing that he's probably going to do some type of structure on it for his business. Planning and zoning recommended approval at their last meeting on the 30th with no conditions. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No questions? I'd
Move to pass ordinance 652-18 to its second reading.
Like
We have a motion and a second. Any further question? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Council. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Those were too far. Discussion possible action by city council pertaining to a zoning change for parcel 801-13-003D from planned development residential to multifamily residential to planned development multifamily residential. 651-18. First reading. Entertain a motion. Introduce.
Move to introduce ordinance 651-18 by title only.
Second? I'll second that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Madam Clerk, would you please introduce 651-18?
An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, amending the zoning classification of parcel number 801-13-003D from planned development residential to multifamily residential to the single zoning designation of planned development multiple residence.
Okay. Discussion. Brett, introduce. Tell us about it.
Thank you. It's currently zoned, mixed zone, PD, PDR, and RM. They're looking to rezone it to PDRM, and its intended use is for townhomes. General plan currently is listed as medium density residential, which allows 2 to 12 units per acre. Only allows for single-family homes, condos and apartment buildings are not allowed. Zoning currently planned development residential and multiple residential. Proposed PDRM. Apartments and multifamily dwellings are allowed, meets requirements. A minimum development size of 3 acres is required. No minimum building size. Setbacks are set with the approval of the zone. The maximum building height was 25 feet and minimum of 20% of the site to be devoted for landscaping. Here's a little concept plan of it. Planning and zoning voted on the 30th to recommend the approval for the change with conditions. The development is limited to no more than 12 units per acre and no less than 8.5 units per acre. The building-to-building spacing setback of no less than 10 feet. Future development is limited to patio homes and townhomes or similar and not apartments and condos. A maximum building height of 25 feet and ensure that the trail has access to the rim trail. That they have access to that rim trail there. Happy to answer any questions.
I see this as a good example of the city not having a plan, because this, where that Riverview Drive was supposed to connect with the other end of Riverview Drive, which is over by Butterfield, but because the city didn't keep that in consideration,
They sold that property.
that easement never came on through when they sold that property to Service Commercial where the hide is right now. That was supposed to be where the access was supposed to come from instead of through residential property. Because of poor planning on the city's part, it never got completed that way.
My understanding was that the blockage of Rimview Drive was a deliberate act by a prior planner that worked for the city. And I was told that was deliberately blocked so that that did not become a major artery for into a residential area. Now, why that makes sense doesn't make sense to me, but that's what my understanding was. You may may have been here on it.
I don't know about that.
Brett, there's 4 single-family lots across the street, correct?
Correct.
And the current zoning is 2 to 12 per acre.
That is correct.
And we're going to have how many per acre now?
We're limiting it to 12, maximum of 12, minimum 8.5.
So we're still within that 2 to 12?
Correct.
On the current zoning, okay.
But can you go to the conditions that P&Z has requested? I'd like to clarify that the last condition is to ensure that the public has access to Rim Trail. Because that is one access point that's heavily populated by the community and neighboring residents. And so this I think is the intent, I'm assuming this was the intent, but I would like a little bit more clarity in the language that the conditions of the development are to provide for public access to Rim Trail. And that could be just simply an opening to get to the trail.
The ordinance has a little different language in it. I don't know if it is adequate to address your concern. The ordinance requires that they ensure trailhead access to the Rim Trail, but it doesn't say public access, but that could be amended. I wasn't at the P&Z meeting. Was that the intent of the condition from the planning and zoning?
Yes.
You could add the word public, so you could move to pass the ordinance contingent upon, with the modification to public access to the Rim Trail.
I move to pass ordinance 651-18 to a second reading with the provision to add the word public for the access to Rim Trail.
We have a motion and a second. Further question or discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
Discussion possible action by City Council pertaining to amending City Code repealing 30-072 same-day passage prohibited and amending 30.073 to two separate readings. Ordinance 649-18 for first reading.
Move to introduce ordinance number 649-18 by title only.
Thank you.
A motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Jerry, would you please, go ahead and introduce, please.
An ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, amending the city of Page Code of Ordinances, repealing 30.072 same-day passage prohibited, and amending 30.073 two separate readings.
Jerry, please. Is it Jerry or is it Mike? Mike?
Mike.
Who's up?
Who's taking credit for this?
Josh.
So this was part of a recommendation that came from the Community Development Department as far as streamlining our processes in the city, particularly on the on the development side, on the land sale side. And so what was recommended by community development was that the city council consider modifying our city code to allow for passage of ordinances with one reading instead of requiring two. State law doesn't dictate one way or the other. It's entirely up to the city as to whether how many readings we want to require to pass an ordinance. And there's a mix around the state. Different cities do it differently. Some do it with one reading, some do it with two. And so what this ordinance would do is it would modify our code to allow for the city council to pass an ordinance with one reading. What that would do, it doesn't change the 30-day waiting period that we have to have. That is state law. So even if you were to modify the code to allow one reading, it would still require us to wait at least 30 days before that ordinance would become effective. But it would shorten up by at least a couple of weeks the process that, the rezone process, for example, that we're going through right now. Those ordinances that you just passed are going to come back to you for a second reading. It also, we have had situations where we've wanted to sell property, and we've had interested buyers that walked away because the process took so long. And so this would shorten up the process by 2 to 3 weeks at least for selling property as well. And so that's what I prepared.
Mayor Council, this is all part of the streamlining process that we've been talking about for the past couple of months, and how we can be more attractive to anyone wanting to come do business here in the city of Page. So again, this is just another way of us streamlining and cutting down on the time frame on money invested by the developers, for example. So that's really where we're coming from. And really, there's only 1 or 2 cities in the state of the 91 cities that really still operate in this capacity. But the majority, I would say about 95%, are all performing at a 95% level or more, percentage or more. And so therefore, we want to be competitive with Flagstaff. We want to be competitive with anyone else around us. So that's where this process came.
Any questions?
Do we have to have 2 readings to introduce an ordinance that is to eliminate a second reading?
Yes.
That's kind of ironic, isn't it?
I move to pass ordinance number 649-18 on to its second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further question or discussion?
I just had one thing. For those that have been around for a while, do you know any history or why we have the second reading model? I'm just curious.
I can probably shed a little bit of light on that. I haven't been around for a while. But as I've kind of poked around at some other city codes, what I found is that there's a couple of cities in Arizona, smaller cities, that have a very similar code, kind of backbone as the City of Page code. And so we either piggyback off them, most likely because we were incorporated later than most of them. There may have been a model code floating around in the 1970s, or we just kind of picked somebody's that we kind of liked and we adopted it. And so I think that's where the 2 readings came from. We just took either a model code at the time, or we piggybacked off of somebody else that had this code. And to the best of my knowledge, that's where I think it came from.
Any other questions? Call for the question. All in favor? Motion on the floor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Council. Moving on, bid awards, we have none scheduled this evening. Business from the mayor, we have none. Business from the manager. Discussion by a city council pertaining to Next Door Social Network. Mike.
Mayor Council, I'll be deferring to one of our fine police officers here, as they've been doing quite a bit of research, so that and this is where it really stems from, is the community engagement piece that is offered to communities, and it also gives the police department another tool for the engagement themselves. Terry will be here to explain that process, but prior to me introducing this, you've actually had a few players involved in Nextdoor here in your community, and so now it's a result of really trying to grow this program a little bit, and Terry will be here to share those pros and maybe some challenges that we may have incorporating if we do move forward with. Terry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Page Police Department has gone live with a Nextdoor social media account, providing us with another way to enhance our community policing efforts. Nextdoor is a free social media site that is designed for neighborhoods. Community members with a Nextdoor account are able to post about a variety of topics, including neighborhood events, yard sales, or even lost pets. Community members are verified by Nextdoor as actual residents of the community. Nextdoor is widely used by public agencies all over the country to communicate with citizens they serve. Community members in Page are already using Nextdoor. 77 households within the city limits have active accounts. The Page Police Department has its own Nextdoor page. By default, anyone in the city limits of Page with a Nextdoor account is automatically subscribed to receive messages that our department posts. If they choose to, community members can unsubscribe from our messages. In addition to sharing information with our community members, we can request feedback using Nextdoor's polling feature. The Page Police Department can receive crime and safety information directly from community members. We can only see posts that community members have specifically chosen to share with us through Nextdoor's Report a Crime feature. Our department will not see any non-crime related posts. Our community and department will benefit in several ways. Neighbors and police can work together to communicate neighborhood-specific public safety issues. Since Nextdoor members are verified residents of the community, our department can be sure we are getting important information to actual residents. Residents can also organize together to form neighborhood watches and emergency planning groups. Specific neighborhoods can be targeted to receive important alerts, like new sex offenders residing nearby. Our department will be able to receive real-time information from community members and seek feedback on our effectiveness as an agency. Ultimately, our department will use Nextdoor to enhance our communication with neighborhoods. We can communicate urgent local incidents like Amber Alert for a missing child or a Silver Alert for a missing elderly person. We can share celebratory or feel-good stories like community members receiving awards for their assistance in emergencies. We will be able to educate the public by warning of a scam or by sending out traffic and safety tips. We'll be able to solicit and take action on feedback from our community by posting polls. One item that I previously mentioned was Nextdoor's Report a Crime feature. Here's an example of how someone might alert their neighborhood of a crime, so neighbors can take steps to avoid becoming the next victim and even help locate a suspect. With the holidays quickly approaching, we see increases in packages being delivered to doorsteps. We also see increases in thefts of those packages. In this scenario, a package has been stolen from the doorstep in front of 1 Birch Street. A police report has already been filed, but the resident wants to alert the neighborhood and send out a photo of the suspect, who captured it on video. Using the Nextdoor application on their phone, the user clicks Post to share something with the neighborhood. They then choose the category Crime and Safety. They then select the category Report a Crime. A screen pops up in the application with some tips, prompting the user to call 911 in an emergency. In the next few screens, the user describes the incident, suspect information, and can upload a photo if they have one. They can then choose to forward the information to the police department. The information then gets instantly sent to police and the neighborhood, prompting everyone to be on the lookout. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
It doesn't say there's any budget impact. Is it cost to this?
As the public information officer for the police department, I'm already operating the website for the police department as well as the Facebook account. It doesn't take any extra time to post. I mean, it takes minutes to post something extra to an additional website.
I guess my question is along those same lines. Communication is great. The more communication you have, the better it is. But there's got to be somebody there to filter through all that stuff and then set up a protocol to address it. And so, I mean, is it down the road going to be a request, hey, we need another officer just to deal with our next door requests that come in and reporting? Do you see that? And that potential is there, correct?
We already have a tips account set up at the police department, which is anyone can email tips@pageaz.gov to provide us with tips going on in their neighborhood. This would be similar to that, just using that feature to email us versus sending us an email directly. It automatically gets sent to our criminal investigation division. Anything that comes through Nextdoor gets forwarded to that email automatically. So there's already a process in place, and we don't perceive any issues being able to handle those requests because they're filtered to an officer just like a call for service would be.
Right, but the more requests and more call for service, the more people you have to provide that service.
True, but this would be in lieu of maybe a phone call to the department. So for a lost dog, perhaps it might actually reduce the number of calls we get. Someone might call our department looking for their dog, where they've already been reunited with that dog because neighbors shared the information amongst themselves.
I see another question down this way. Yeah, I could tell you years ago when social media was just kind of new at the Fusion Center down in East Valley, we poked around with this, and once the community connected, it took a little bit of time to push it out there to get the connections, but once they connected, we solved a lot of crime with this, I can tell you that. So I think it's a good effort. My only question is how do you push it out there to where we could, you know, back in the day we were using Facebook, Twitter. I mean, how do you push it out there that this Nextdoor thing is available? I mean, I didn't even know about Nextdoor, so.
On our website, we're going to have a logo that says we're already connected on Nextdoor. So anyone choosing to visit our website will see, oh, we're on Nextdoor. They can click on the logo, and it'll prompt them to go to the Nextdoor site to sign up. We've also posted it to our Facebook page already, saying we're on Nextdoor. This is how you can join if you choose to. Ultimately, it's going to be up to the neighborhood to spread the word, and hopefully some success stories will help that.
Mayor, Council, another means is Channel 4. We've taken over Kane in the IT department, and we'll be doing the oversight on Channel 4. And so that will be another means that we'll be able to get out to the community a little bit more too on the use of Nextdoor.
Darby?
Is there some sort of a feedback mechanism or something? So, you know, let's say someone reports something on Nextdoor. I guess this is a multi-part question. What kind of response time do you have, and how is that prioritized against, say, someone not calling 911? And if someone submits something in Nextdoor, if it's not a high priority, when can they reasonably expect some kind of either a callback, whatever it may be, that, you know, their complaint or their issue was heard?
Yes. So it immediately says, do not use this as an emergency tool. As soon as you post something that crime and safety, it says this is not in place of 911. If it's an emergency, call 911. Prioritization-wise, it'll be answered the next time a detective's in the office because it'll get sent to our tips account. So this is not to communicate to the police department in lieu of filing a police report. If it's something that is urgent, they will still need to file a police report. This is more so community members and police can work together to hopefully solve a crime before the next person is victimized.
Questions?
Only comment I have a friend that lives in a HOA and they use this, and I think it's anything we can do to bring communities together and neighborhoods together is a good thing. His reaction is that it doesn't necessarily involve crime. The majority involves just being friendly neighbors. Hey, I'm going to be gone. Would someone pick my trash and put it in my side yard? Those are the kind of things that people share among each other who live in proximity. So I think anything that brings our community closer together is a positive step.
Anybody else? This is for discussion only, so Gary, we appreciate the presentation and stuff, and it sounds like we got some good stuff going on here. Thank you, sir. Business from the attorney, we have none this evening. Business from council, discussion, possible action from council pertaining to fiscal year 19 first quarter financial report. Dugan, Mark?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get started, and since Mike is bailing on us, we have a new recruit here that is going to step in. Right, Mark?
Right,
so I'll try to make it as brief as I can. The introduction page, I'm assuming that's self-explanatory. There's really not a lot of interpretation there. If you guys have looked that over, just basically the front section is, what the vacancies were, what positions were hired this quarter, what vacancies opened up this quarter, and what are the positions outstanding that still need to be filled, along with what we spend in capital equipment and improvement. So the page 2 is an overlay of of all funds. This is for all citywide funds, and in our first quarter, July, August, and September, this shows we've had revenue of $3.2 million. I'm sorry, $3.6 million, expenses of $3.2 million. So we've underspent our revenue by $465,000. Mark and I met with Linda and Christy, and in an effort to simplify this report, make it sort of a little bit less busy in terms of clutter, the next quarter report will not have a lot of the written narrative as to what's going on. It'll basically be a graphical presentation. But the all funds report is particularly in the first quarter, doesn't really lend itself to a lot of relevancy because there's still a lot of transfers to be made. We haven't, this doesn't reflect our transfer to the debt service. It doesn't reflect a lot of capital projects that are being built. So anyway, it doesn't really reflect a very accurate representation of what the year is going to be. Basically, first quarter. Moving to the page 3, which is a summary by fund. Here we can see what our cash balances are on all of the different funds. As I mentioned, this does not represent the transfers. So as you can see in our debt service fund, we're showing a balance at the end of September of $6.8 million. That does not reflect the transfer that we made tonight that's going to go in to make that fund whole. And happy to state that as of this month, we will have accrued sufficient funds to pay off our 2011 series bond. And that's a milestone I think that we all should be very proud of. We've got the city in a strong fiscal position, and we're postured for growth. We just executed a new zoning code, which is going to position us to accommodate that growth. And so all things are looking pretty good, I think, for the city of Page. Moving on to every quarter, because this really is what is the operating side of the city. The general fund, or the all funds, includes a lot of grant funds and HERF funds and things that we don't necessarily have total control over. This is a page that we operate by, and this is the heartbeat, the financial heartbeat of the city here. So when we look at this, this is what we're doing, this is what we're spending, this is what we're getting in tax revenue. There is one thing that stands out here, I'm sure you guys have noticed this, and that is that the revenue for the first quarter is $1.1 million lower than the prior year. And when Mark and I, we met with Linda, we had a little bit of heartburn over this. However, what Linda points out is that the auditors are mandating that the revenue from sales tax be placed in the month that it was collected by the state. And so what that means is the prior year essentially has another month of revenue. So when we're comparing this year to last year, last year had 3 months of revenue, this year only had 2 months of revenue. So because the tax report came in September, it was for August, and the tax report came in for August was July, but the tax report for July was for June. So June got not accounted for in this report. Okay. If you look at the sales tax report, we're actually $200,000 ahead in revenue from a year prior. So this report is somewhat misleading in the sense that, you know, our revenues are low and they're not. So you can kick in any time you want.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
And so as you can see, the general fund has a revenue of $3 million, and that's actually more like $4 million. Our expenses were 2.7, so with the report as it exists, we're 209 than the prior year due to many capital improvement projects we have underway, or planned to be underway. We've spent $2.8 million in expenses, and that's $974,000 below last year. But again, this is only the first quarter. We haven't kicked in a lot of projects. We just got on the cusp of a few major capital improvement projects, and so these numbers in the second quarter are going to look significantly different. Going on to page 5. Again, as you can see on the revenue side, this report shows revenue of $2.1 million and compared to $3.2 million. In actuality, it's about $1.4 million short. So the other highlight here is under general services, we're showing an increase in utilities of $42,000, and in our meeting with Linda, our staff is going to look into that. If it's an accounting where perhaps last year included more payments and like the revenue, it's a month off. Well, that's one thing. What we've asked is that if we're really spending $42,000 a quarter in utilities more than the prior year, that should be brought to the city manager's attention to be further investigated. That's you know, that's $13,000 a
Pretty
month.
bump. Pretty good bump.
That's 26% above what it would be. The other thing here is under human resource. You can see that the $1.1 million that is less than last year's expenditures is essentially the $1 million in PSPRS, but this year we've allocated $1.4 million, so that number is going to be actually higher than last year. And page 7 is essentially just a graphical presentation of where our expenses by category, public safety, general government, magistrate, etc. So there's really not much to report there. And then the summary pages in the back, if there's anything that you need clarification on the general fund, as far as the summary by department, all of the numbers can be drilled down and expanded on, so you can get a better detail of what the numbers are on those supplemental pages. So that's all I have. Mark, do you have anything to say?
I'm in training. This is good.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Next item of business, discussion of possible action by City Council pertaining to rescheduling December 5th, 2018 regular City Council meeting. Before you have this evening the fact that we're making a request to move the December 5th meeting to December 10th. The reason for that is that we have some newly elected officials, and they will be going to training on the 6th, the 7th, and they will be unable to attend a meeting because they'll be traveling on that day to get to their newly elected training, officials training. So I'm asking that we entertain a motion to reschedule.
Mayor, I move to reschedule December 5th, 2018 regular City Council meeting to December 10th, 2018.
Looking for a second?
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second. Further question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Member President. Boards and commission, discussion of possible action by City Council pertaining to restructuring of the City Advisory Boards, Ordinance 650-18. I'd entertain a motion to introduce.
Mayor, I move to introduce ordinance number 650-18 by title only.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk, would you please introduce 650-18?
An ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Page, Coconino County, Arizona, amending the code of the City of Page, 31.20, Airport Advisory Board, and 31.26, Community Development Advisory Board, and creating an Economic Development Advisory Board.
Mike.
Mayor and Council, when I first came here, this was an existing issue that was before you back in July. And the interim city manager at the time was recommending dissolving the Community Development Advisory Board. And as a result of there weren't enough board members making meetings, he recommended going from a 7-member board to a 5-member board. My job was, as a result of tabling the issue, was to find out a new scope, find out a little bit of the history, and how we can make this advisory board effective and purposeful. As a result of my research and exploring other best practices in other communities similar to the size of the City of Page, and taking a look at two of some other communities that are a little bit larger than Page, we came across the possibility of proposing tonight a creation of a new board. To do the creation of the new board, though, I would like to follow the recommendation of the interim city manager in dissolving the existing Community Development Board and also the Airport Advisory Board. What I'm trying to propose here is, in the creation of the Economic Development Advisory Board, that we include the airport issues into this new formed Economic Development Advisory Board. Other components of the economic development will not only just be the economic development piece that we need to develop a strategic plan moving forward and working with the council, but also to consider the tourism aspect that goes along with economic development. Airport tourism are all part of the mechanism of economic development in many other cities, and I think that's consistent of a scope that I'd like the board to consider as an option. So therefore, I'm recommending that we dissolve the Community Development Advisory Board and the Airport Advisory Board, and creating an Economic Development Advisory Board consisting of board members of 7 members and a commission. That way we don't have to minimize the commission or the board down to 5 members, and I think you'll see that there will be some participation into the new creation of an Economic Development Advisory Board. With that, I'd like to pass that back.
Questions, comments?
The feedback you received from current board members about joining forces, are they positive on this?
I'm sorry?
Have you received feedback from current board members? Have you asked this question of the boards?
No, Mayor, Council, no, I didn't seek the feedback. The participation level on both boards are minimal. But the development of this ED board could be a member of the airport board. It could be a member of the community development board. But I'd like to open it up to see what kind of participation we get as we move forward. But no, sir, I didn't.
I'd asked Mike earlier today, that if we did this, would those people that are presently serving that wanted to continue to, in those areas we've had some problems trying to get some meetings. We've missed a couple airport board meetings because we haven't had quorums and stuff like that. And the airport is certainly one of our big economic drivers in our community, especially moving forward. So I think that it makes sense that we should be looking at it as an economic driver rather than just dealing with airplanes. It needs to be a part of the bigger picture.
Mayor and Council, the development of the board can also incorporate the likes of maybe a member of the Banner Hospital, member of the school board, but I think it gives us an opportunity to spread this out a little bit so that we're giving a full overview of what's in the city of Page. Again, it's an option. It's a practice that is common in other communities and has a lot of input, and so that's what I would be looking for.
Question or discussion? Anyone else?
I think it's a positive move to refocus. Fewer very active boards is certainly an advantage to having multiple boards that aren't always consistent in their participation, and particularly with the focus on trying to revitalize Block 17 and downtown and all of the economic development drivers we have going. This is probably a good time to move in this direction.
I would just add that, Michael, as you look at a new board member, I think it's a progressive move. I'm in favor of it, but there are some board members that have been there a long time, and they have put in a lot of sweat and tears and their own time as volunteer. They don't get much out of it. So I would just say, as you reach out, talk to some of those existing board members. Don't take them for granted, because they put a lot of work into the existing board. That was the tourism, and there was the economic development, and now it's morphing into this. I'm not opposed to that. I just say, use your assets, because you have some really good assets there in the community.
We'll do, council member.
Any other questions? Hearing none.
I move to pass ordinance 650-18 under the second reading.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Pass 650-18 to second reading. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously with those members present. discussion, possible action by city council pertaining to appointments to the Page Substance Abuse Task Force. This time this evening, you have before you, we have 2 vacancies on the board, and we have 2 applicants that are wishing to fill those seats. One is Jenny Lassen, and the other is Kevin Albrecht. And Jenny is the one that got the scholarship last week, or 2 weeks ago or so, and she's expressed an interest of trying to serve that board. So I would make a motion to appoint Jenny Lassen to the Page Substance Abuse Task Force for a term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second.
We have motion, multiple seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. For us, we also have Kevin Albright, who's interested in serving. We've had no other applicants step forward, and we've been advertising these for some time. Kevin's first choice was Substance Abuse Task Force. He did take a position on the airport board also, but his first choice was when he was reached out to and asked if he would interested in doing it, and he confirmed that he would be. So I'll make a motion to appoint Kevin Albright to the Page Substance Abuse Task Force with a term ending June 30th, 2019.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. I forgot to ask for any discussion on the prior one. I will catch up. Did any further discussion? Then I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have that board filled. And the next one is Parks and Recreation Advisory Board appointment. At this time, we have 1 vacancy for the Parks and Rec Board, and we have 1 applicant at this time. And that applicant is Elizabeth Rickardi, and we have no other applicants at this time. I'd entertain a motion, or I'll make a motion.
Since this applicant is very well qualified, is going to be a great asset to the #1 leading advisory board in the city, which is the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. And it's only going to strengthen further with her addition. I would move to appoint Elizabeth Riccardi to the Page Park and Rec Board for a term ending June 30th, 2021.
Second. We have a second. And a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously, the President. And I picked tonight to wear my dress shoes instead of my boots. Okay. Discussion and possible action by City Council pertaining to Parks and Rec. Discussion by City Council pertaining to board liaisons. Anyone have a liaison report this evening?
I have a liaison report from the Best Advisory Board, and it's too bad you didn't wear your boots tonight, because I'm going to invite Brian Carey to talk about corrals.
Good segue. Thank you, Council. I just wanted to give you a status report on your request to the advisory board last month, which was to take a look at the Vermilion Cliffs Arena and Corrals and look at future management, look at possible actions, improvements, that type of thing. Our board met last week, and we identified some information gaps, and we're going to be trying to fill those. I met with the city manager prior to that meeting, and he was able to provide some basic financial information, renter information. We discussed that at the board, and our plan is to have at least an interim recommendation, if not a final one, to the City Council in January. We'll meet again in December. We asked our board members to do some further outreach to their renters We had one renter address our committee last week. We're going to reach out to at least one of the neighbors there and just see how the neighbors interact with the arena and corrals. We're going to look at some other cities' fee structures to see if ours is in line with that. And I need to get some more city information on expenses, aging report, deferred maintenance, anything that we've got to inform a decision. At this point in discussions of the committee, there was no talk of closing or recommending that. It still could come up, but I don't foresee that. Instead, most of the people thought that we could continue to make improvements to turn that into an asset, perhaps generate some additional revenue. The arena is well utilized. The corrals have been kept together, but there's some obvious visual improvements that could be made. So we'll try to get you a fairly comprehensive recommendation in January. But I wanted to get you a status report so you knew we were working on it.
Thank you. Question, interim, what's interim, do we have any interim solutions? What are we doing in the interim between now and January? Do we have an operator hanging on or what?
Well, in the interim, we have staff sort of filling in till we get the recommendations from the advisory board, the Parks and Rec, soon to be second best advisory board. And we have Public Works overseeing the maintenance and the grounds, and Robin in my office is overseeing in coordination with finance, the accounting, the billing, those kind of other issues. But we've got it covered for right now.
Okay.
One of the aspects that we talked about as well with the board was, and the board is reaching out to the corral users to see if there's a feasibility of creating sort of a users group, a special interest group of participants that are active in having their horses boarded there and utilizing the corrals, so that we can find out what the synergies are there, so that we could maybe tap into that and get some volunteerism going and some participation from the actual users.
One other thing we're doing is interfacing with the county to see how Fort Tuthill is operated, and we've already gotten information back from them. Most of the Parks and Recreation Department in Coconino County, it's not good English, sorry. Many of the activities like camping and the use of the horse corrals and stuff in the county are actually farmed out to third-party operators, whether it's a group, a commission, a company, or something like that. And that may very well be the type of recommendation we make. Right now, the city has had a contract for management, and it was just covered kind of some of the bare minimums. I think with perhaps some additional language in there, we can actually get more rodeos or carnivals or other events suitable for the arena, that type of thing, and not have the city have to manage that directly through an existing Parks and Recreation department yet. So it's a third-party thing, maybe something that comes to you. And we have already some language on requests for proposals and leases and things like that. So,
all right. Thank you. The next item of business on the agenda is claims, and we have none. There's only one other thing to do. Before I do that, I want to thank the council and staff one more time, and the citizens that are here, the citizens that may be at home, citizens that are on LPNN. It has been my pleasure to serve this community. I will still continue to serve this community as long as my boots are down, not up. And so because I'm out of this seat, doesn't mean that I won't be in that seat or serving on a board within our community, because that's what I believe I should be doing. So I thank you for the honor of serving all of Page. Thank you. This is my last meeting. That being said, I'd entertain a motion. Second? Motion a second? Adjourned.